Welcome back to the Way Up Podcast. I'm your host, Geoff Knoll, and today I'm thrilled to introduce you to a true trailblazer in the world of personal and professional reinvention, Adam Markel. Adam has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and Los Angeles Times. He's a best-selling author of Pivot, The Art and Science of Reinventing Your Career and Life, as well as his newest book, Change Proof, Leveraging the Power of Uncertainty to Build Long-Term Resilience. Markel is also a leading international keynote speaker. Adam's journey from lifeguarding at Jones Beach in New York to building a multi-million-dollar law firm, then leading one of the world's largest business and personal development training companies is nothing short of extraordinary. Join me as we delve into the inspiring story of Adam Markel right here on the Way Up Podcast. The Way Up Podcast is proudly brought to you by my real estate team, the Noble Team eXp Realty. We're redefining industry standards in the markets we operate, distinguishing ourselves from the crowd. We leverage our uniqueness to gain a strategic edge, all while elevating not only ourselves, but also those in our world, including our competitors. Join us on this journey. Your time and investment will undoubtedly be well placed. Hang with us till the end. I know you won't be disappointed. Well, I am really excited to be here with my friend Adam Markel, and I'm using the term friend because I like the guy, but we just met at a health conference, a wellness conference in Pulaski County, which was absolutely incredible. Adam, what was your take on that? And I do want your opinion. I know you are a speaker. You go around, you travel the world speaking, doing these talks to people. Do you see many counties that are putting on wellness clinics like that?
Oh, I love that question. The answer to the question is no. I don't see a lot of counties doing that. So it was not so much unique. I mean, others have done it for sure, but I think it's an outlier at this point. So Pulaski County, kudos to them, kudos to Deborah and the entire team over there, Melissa and the rest, because they really embrace this concept. And actually, in fairness, they initially met me when I spoke for Alice Akers Arney in Springfield, Missouri, and they were taken by the content. They were taken by the idea that you could actually help people to create greater wellness for themselves. Greater resilience is pretty much the way I leg into that conversation. And then they decided, hey, we want to do it. And just as an aside, I meet a lot of people. As you said, I travel quite a bit and meet a bunch of people. And I can't tell you the number of people who've said to me after a presentation, like, we should do that here or there or somewhere else, whether it's in their company, if it was a more broadly, like an association gathering or something, or we should do that somewhere else. And then I never hear from them again. So the fact that Melissa and Deborah, when they met me about a year ago, said, hey, we should really do this in Pulaski County. I was like, great, just let me know how we can help you. And then they got back and said, hey, we're doing this. And so that was a testament to their setting that intention and then doing more than just saying, hey, I think this would be a good idea. They actually took those steps and had to just, do everything that's required, get people enrolled in the idea and, maybe move a mountain here or there when it came to whatever obstacles might have shown up and everything else that was required to just see it to fruition. So literally my hat is off to them.
Yeah, I sat in on a Growth Alliance meeting and they were talking about planning the next one already because it was a very well received. Must have been some good sponsors in that. There was books given to everybody that came. Just so you know, this was just a few weeks ago, but I'm chapter 14 in the book. I was really trying to race through and get all the way through it so I would be able to be more engaged and have a better perception of you, a better look into you. But I do feel like as far as I am into the book, I have a really great insight into you and your story. And I'm really very excited to have you get on here and tell your story because it's pretty powerful. And I think that you're not alone in the fact of I'm racing a little bit ahead. I kind of want you to just tell your story, really. So let's go to that and then I'll get into my thought of this. So go ahead and share your story, please.
All right. So Geoff, I got to ask you this. What part of my story do you want me to share?
So you're in the corporate world, you're an attorney. So many people get to this place of You're doing things that you should be happy. You should be feeling fulfilled, and you're not. You're burning the candle at both ends. You're working. You are honestly doing all of it to try to provide for your family and do this, but it has you working all the time. You're burning yourself out. You're feeling worn out, and you're just trying to make it, trying to survive, and you're not happy. And you do it to the point where you get sick and you're in the hospital. I have a similar story myself,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I think
it was just,
you're telling my story better than me.
well, it's just because it resonates with me. I'm
Yeah.
reading it. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is, and I have this podcast. I have people come on here. I hear your story over and over and over again.
Yeah.
You would be surprised, and you probably wouldn't, because you're going around telling it. And the more that you share, you have people come out of the woodwork, I guarantee it, and say, that's me too. You just told my story
All the time.
all
All
the
the time.
time.
Yeah.
So
It's not, it's not an unusual story in that respect that we're all kind of working from a very similar base of operation, base of information. And that is, growing up, you think that what I need to do is figure stuff out, of course, and be smart and make good decisions and work hard. And then I will be happy. I will get everything in life that I want, where's, coming to me. And what I think we all kind of at some point find out is that there's more to the story than that, because I did those things, and I went to school and I studied hard. I wasn't always a great student, but I certainly did well enough to get out, get a degree. I went back to school even after I started in a different profession. I was working in publishing for a little while. Ironically, I worked for Simon and Schuster, for a division of Simon and Schuster called Prentice Hall Press, which was later sold to a different company. And I worked in their legal department, the subsidiary rights department, which is interesting. And I lasted like 6 months there before I literally wanted to throttle my boss. My manager she was just, as I recall it, awful.
mm,
So I was like, I'm literally out of here. And my next job was as a teacher. And I spent a couple of years in middle school teaching English to great kids, and it was exhausting work, and it was definitely not my calling to do that. And I went back to school and became a lawyer. And primarily my choosing of that work at that point was, I had already gotten a little taste of corporate America, and I also got a taste in the space of education, and that was because my wife was a teacher, and I saw how much she was lit up by doing that work. My other people in my family had been teachers, so I thought, this is really fulfilling work. I didn't have it for that profession. And the corporate thing was, man, if this is what I got to do, I got to eat this kind of guff. If I got to suck up in this situation where somebody is literally abusing me on a daily basis, I'm like, that's not my place. And so with that limited information available to me at that time, I said, well, look, what do I really want to do? I want to make a lot of money. And I want to make a lot of money because I grew up without a lot. That wasn't what my family had. So I want that. I want to have a house as opposed to living in an apartment, and everything that goes along with that. And then I married my college sweetheart, who I adore to this day. And I knew we loved kids and we wanted to have kids. So it was like, I want to have kids, lots of them or whatever, and be able to provide really well for them. So I knew I got to make a lot of money. I also knew I wanted to be, I wanted to do something that other people respected, and that there was some, and again, I wouldn't have articulated it at this point at 25 or 26 years old when I was making this decision. But under, as I look at it now, that was what was really running me. Was I want to be respected. I want to be in a profession of some kind that people look up to. I want to have the power associated with that. I want to have the money that's associated with that. And those are my drivers, which are really crappy reasons to as it turns out, for me personally, to have done what I did, which was to go back to school, spend 3 years in law school, survive that ordeal, because it is absolutely that. It's a gauntlet to get through law school. I passed the bar exam on the first try, both in two different states where we were living in. At the time, I think we were living in New York, but we moved to New Jersey. I passed the bar exam in both those states on the first try. And then I literally just started practicing law. And 10 years went by. It literally, like, in an instant, seemingly. 10 years went by. I had built a practice. I was making a lot of money. I was in power, position of power in many respects, although the only time when you literally felt like you had no power and you were completely vulnerable was when you were in a courtroom and there was a judge, because that's the all-powerful Oz. And even the most exceptional, qualified, seasoned attorney is like a child in the presence of a judge. That's just like the reality of that dynamic there. So that, other than those moments, I felt very much in control. And so that's what was driving me. And then I got to a place where, as you described, I'm working 80 hours, 90-hour weeks. My wife and I, we have a bunch of kids. I'm not seeing them as much as I want. And when I am with them, or I am with my wife, I'm really tired a lot. I'm agitated as well. I'm not loving exactly how I am showing up in that aspect of my life. And there's just no, like, I didn't get any training in any part of schooling from elementary on up to, getting my law degree. I got no training in how do you take care of yourself in these situations when you find yourself under stress. I didn't get any information or training around what do you do when you're not feeling passionate about your work, or when the work feels like it's killing you, it's drowning you. And so, yeah, I knew enough at that point to know that something was off. But I also knew that I couldn't focus on it because I had work to do. Like my father-in-law used to call it navel gazing. And I didn't have time for navel gazing. At least that didn't seem like that was, a good use of my time. So I ignored the whole thing. And then one day I was like supposed to be at our son Max's baseball game. And instead I'm literally lying, flat on my back. You can, for people listening to this now, you can picture it. I'm lying on my back and I'm on a gurney. I'm on a gurney and I'm in the emergency room at our area hospital. And I got all these like things stuck to my chest, the electrodes and whatnot. And my fingers are numb and cold and tingling at the ends. And I'm literally sweating, but really sweating. And my heart's beating like it's outside of my body. My wife is there with me. And I'm just waiting. And I'm literally in my head, a look into my head. I've got just this massive fear that's happening. Like I'm literally thinking I may not be here, but I may expire before the doctor walks in the door, like comes through the curtain. Like that's what I'm thinking. I'm never going to see my kids again. And I'm just in abject fear. And then suddenly the sheet gets pulled back. Doctor walks in and says, "Okay, I got to tell you right out of the gate, Mr. Markel, your heart's fine. There's nothing wrong with it." And words to that effect. And the next thing I know, I don't hear what he says after that, because I'm just bawling. My wife is crying, and I got this great, amazing sense of relief that's occurring for me. I'm just feeling this relief. And then it's a little while later, I hear him say what you're actually experiencing. And I'm sure the listeners out there know what he said to me. He said, "You're having a panic attack, an anxiety attack," which is new terminology for me at that time. I had never heard that before. So I listen to him. I hear it. I don't know what the heck he's talking about. All I know is I'm going to live. Yeah. I'm going to live. And I'm going to go home. And I'm going to see my kids. And I'm going to hug my kids. And I literally, in that moment, I felt this amazing relief. And if I'm being entirely honest, only a moment or two later, my next feeling that I recall was shame, embarrassment, and anger. Anger literally like self-loathing that I had put my wife through that I was in this state, this weakened state that does not match my self-image at all. Does not match the
Right.
image of a warrior, of a attorney or anything, a father, a husband, none of it. So I got out of that hospital like lickety split. Got the gown off and I went home and I hugged the kids and I hugged them, hugged them hard because it was, you know, I was getting a second chance or so. I was getting a reprieve. It's how it felt. And then only a couple of weeks later, my wife tried to talk to me about it, of course, just to understand better what had happened and wanting me to have support. And I wouldn't talk about it. She tried to get me to really engage or get engaged, like speaking about it with other people. And I just would not. I refused. But 2 weeks later, where am I on a Saturday? I'm in my office this time. I'm literally decided my answer to the whole situation was I'm going to find my way out of the rat race, out of the maze by working harder and being more successful so that I could then just quit the whole damn thing. So I'll leave the story there for the moment and that's when people afterward will come up to me and say, holy smokes, this just literally describing my life,
Right.
and how I feel and how I just don't talk to anybody about it either because it's just too wonky,
Well, whenever we're vulnerable like that, it makes us feel weak. And I don't know if that's how your childhood was. My parents, I didn't come from like military parents or something. But for some reason, it was still ingrained in my head that men don't cry. You don't. That didn't come from my parents, I don't think, but for some reason, I've just latched on and I have a real issue myself, and it's a personal issue, but I feel like, man, I can't show my emotion. I can't show my weakness because it makes me feel weak. So I know exactly. I felt guilty. I was in the hospital for 4 days. They were running tests to see if I had leukemia or lymphoma because that was the symptoms were like that. Thank God I didn't, but I felt guilty that other people were having to pick up the slack of the work that I couldn't do because I was in the hospital. I was literally ashamed of myself. I'd call and apologize. I'm like, man, I can call people. They're like, no, don't. You have to take some time. Like you're in the hospital right now. You've got to heal. Like for real, get real with yourself. This is serious. So, and the I totally connect with this. Go home and hug your kids. And I want to ask you if it's similar for you. When I was laying in the hospital bed thinking, what if this is the end? What if I don't make it back? What if I don't get to experience the rest of watching my son grow up? I was embarrassed and ashamed of the example that I had set because I've always had these big dreams. I've been a dreamer. I talk about all the things that I wanted to do, and I didn't have a whole lot of follow through. Which was embarrassing to me. I wanted to create all this success in my life, and I didn't make it happen. And that was the example that my son was going to see. That just killed me. And beyond that, there was all the things I feel like as a parent, our most valuable lessons we can teach our kids is how to be successful and thrive in life. And I hadn't figured that out myself. So teaching it to anyone else that wasn't a possibility. So it made me feel more guilt and shame and it hurt so freaking bad. Does that relate? Do you feel that at all? I mean, you were successful. You had been doing stuff, but
Well, you put your finger right on it. I mean, Geoff, and I so appreciate your willingness to go there in our conversation now and share that, because I'm sure there's just a lot of people listening to what you're saying, and they're relating to it. So I do relate to it big time. And it's not for the reason, I mean, objectively, like you said, people could look at what I was doing in life and go, hey, he's successful, so he's certainly modeling success for his kids. But that's not how I felt. I
Right.
didn't feel that way at all. I felt like a fraud. I felt like I'm faking it here because I don't feel successful.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the example that I'm setting for my kids, then I'm going to lead them astray in a whole other way. Like
Right.
they should follow my path, that they should end up where I'm at now. I mean, you really hit the essence of it, Geoff, because truthfully, if you said to me, do I want any of our four kids to end up in the spot I'm at right now, meaning the whole package? And the answer would have been no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not
That's
that not that
that's
I
a
didn't have a
tough pill
million
to
things to be
swallow.
like, yeah, I mean, I was grateful. I'm married to this most amazing person. We have healthy kids. We have a home and a million things to be grateful for, but yet
Sure.
I did not feel like a personal success because I was miserable. It's an like it's a paradox.
So you go through this, you take the lumps and you're like, okay, I've got to make a change. I want to know, at what point do you say, you know what? I've got to write a book. I've got to share this with other people. And I know you said your wife was encouraging you and pushing you, share your story. You can help people. You can help people. Though it's great to have people like that in your ear. And it sounds like I've been communicating back and forth with your wife in email, just planning on this. So I know, and I have, my wife is, she's my right hand. Without her, man, this is a train wreck without the organization that comes from her. But
Yeah.
having that, I just want to know, at what point do you make that shift into, I'm not an attorney, I'm going into full steam ahead of,
Yeah.
I want to share my story and I want to help people.
Yeah. And this is an interesting moment because I know you're halfway through or about halfway through Change Proof, which is the latest book that I wrote during the pandemic. And that book is a book about resilience. And that's to me the bigger story here. But the story that comes before that was the book I wrote in 2016 called Pivot, and the reissuance of that book in paperback form came, I think, in 2021 or 22. And that really is the story of literally the pivot out of practicing law and into a different way of earning a living and living and being and all that kind of thing. And in that book, there's a chapter about resilience and how resilience is important to your pivot. And what I've realized later was that the bigger story was resilience itself,
Mhm.
which includes the capacity to pivot. So, but back to your question, I had to reimagine, and this is all in the book Pivot. I had to reimagine my identity. Because again, what I developed when I was in my 20s, when I said I'll go back to law school, was I was creating an identity for myself as this professional, this person people would respect, as I would respect, and this high earner, and all that kind of stuff. Like that's an identity. So what I talk about in that book is this idea of, you go into the pivot phone booth, and you're like, like from back in the day with Superman. If anybody's ever seen the TV show Superman, the
Yeah,
story,
you jump
obviously.
in the phone booth and take
Right,
off your glasses and now you're Superman.
right. You're Clark Kent. You go in the phone booth, you take off the glasses, and then whoop, you come out of the phone booth and you're Superman. And so that's the concept here, is that you've got to create this you have to have a conversation, be curious, and then have a conversation around, well, what could my identity be? What is my identity? If it's not this, then what is it? And the funny part is that, having, this being many, many years later now for me, what I see is that the through line of my identity, professional identity and personal in many ways, was there all along in everything I had done. So I am today, as a lawyer, I hated the battle. I wasn't into the battle, even though part of me needed to, again, become more powerful and prove to myself and prove to others even that I had the capacity to do battle. Because I got bullied when I was a kid. And yeah, I exacted a little bit of whatever you want to call it, against one of my bullies, right? But when you're bullied as a kid, even if you end up having that close the loop moment and you can get that bully later on, you stand up to him, punch him in the face or whatever the thing is, right? That gives you that moment. A lot of people never get that moment, as we know, because sometimes bullies are a lot older and bigger, or it's just not in the cards that happens. And it doesn't have to be, but it's like the being bullied, it creates, again, it creates some, it develops your identity. And a lot of times that's what happens, is a person identifies with having been bullied, or other people being more powerful, etc. And so for me, going to law school, as it turned out, was a reinvention of sorts for myself, because now I was going to be the one with power. And as it turned out, in my law practice, I represented a lot of underdogs. Like throughout my practice, I was representing underdogs the whole way through. I handled a lot of employment discrimination work for plaintiffs. I handled people that were in really dire shape financially, and I did a lot of bankruptcy work, but debtor work, not creditor work. I was always on the side of the little guy, battling the big guys, battling the big law firms, battling people with more money and more power. And I loved kicking their ass like that. I loved it because, again, it was me recreating a new identity for myself based on that old identity that wasn't my choice. So, but the one thing that I loved, because I'm not really built that way. I'm not built for, I don't love to be in confrontations. It's not how I want to live. I'm much more peaceful by nature.
Me too.
So, but what I love about the law then was the counseling part, the way that I could help people, make them feel better, help to solve their problem, help them to have a better night's sleep when they were, just sick with worry. I love that.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
get to experience some impact of that. You're actually making change in people's life. That's huge.
And the work that I do today, the through line of it all is the aspect of being a teacher. I was a teacher for a few years. I didn't have what it took to be in front of 150 kids every day. That wasn't where I was able to serve when I was in my 20s. But I love teaching. I love helping people to find information that empowers them to make changes or live a better life, be performing better at work, or leading other people more effectively. That I wake up every day loving that aspect. So the through line for me, changing from the law to the work I do now, as it turns out, it wasn't an entire reinvention. I came out of that phone booth, needing to change certain things, but not needing to change everything, as it turns out. And that's what when I counsel people around that, this idea of like, what is your identity and why? How did it come to be that the identity you have today is what it is? It requires some self-awareness, some thought, some, navel gazing around that. And then going into that phone booth to say, what could I be? If this is not entirely suited to me, what could it look like? And there's a lot more detail around that process and other process in the book, Pivot, around how you engage with that conversation and you follow your curiosity. But ultimately, I did decide to write a book about it because I had started to speak about my where I was in my life at the time and the kind of success I had had, but also not being fulfilled and wanting other success. I literally was speaking about it as it was happening, as it was evolving. And then a little distance later, as I could see that I had developed this plan B, again, something I talk about in the book, I didn't tear down my first bridge the bridge that was paying for the mortgage and paying for all those things. Like I didn't just jump ship on my life or on my work, but I started working in this other area simultaneously, building a second bridge. When I could see that that second bridge could potentially support what we had going on, that's when I began to dismantle the first bridge. And that's when I wrote the book Pivot. That's when I started to write that down and get it in a format that potentially might also lead other people in that with process, with structure, so that they could potentially do something different if they wanted to.
I love that. I love that. Um, if you were to look over your life, Adam, and think about something that really helped position you for success in your life, and you can choose what avenue of success you're focusing that on, but what would be something that you can identify that positioned you to be successful?
Wow. I mean, I feel like what I got from my parents, and I think this is, true of your grandparents. I mean, I got so much from my grandparents and my parents, and then I also got a ton of things, that are really confusing, and things that didn't help me or don't help me. I mean, so it's a mixed bag, right, folks? I just want you to get that, everybody's got their stories and their traumas and all of that. That's just a part of the whole thing. I'm a little, I don't mind saying this at this point, because I feel like I feel good. I look pretty good. I'm on my path, like, and I say that not like in a brash way, but as a preface to, I'm 59. So I've been around the sun a few more times than a few people that are probably listening to this, and maybe some folks that have been around the sun longer than me. But I can say this from this perspective. We all have a ton of things going on under the surface. You look at person that you think is successful, and maybe they are, or maybe they've got stuff that you think you want or want. But it really is different to be in someone else's shoes. And the one thing I can tell you that's the same is that in anybody's shoes, people are just people. It doesn't matter what position or title or anything, whether it's the late Queen of England or anybody else you can think of in your world. People are just people. And so everybody's got their sadnesses and their regrets and their fears and the things that piss them off. And it's just how we all are. So that's the equal field. That's the level playing field. What you do with that whole mixed bag of stuff to create value in other people's lives, that is the differentiator. Because if you're committed to that thing alone, creating value in other people's lives, creating value in the marketplace, if you will, there's no holding you back.
Right.
There just isn't. And again, I get the fact that there are structural issues in our world. People have been, I had a woman on the podcast the other day, and she grew up in South Africa during apartheid. So, when Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in a prison cell. So there's that too. And yet, even in Mandela's case, and I said this to her because I wanted to get her thoughts. Like, am I talking out of my rear end when I say this? They imprisoned him, and we know the story is he comes out of prison and emancipates. He leads his people out of bondage. It's like a Moses thing. It's remarkable, right? After 27 years in, like, I don't know, an 8x6 cell or something. The one thing that they could not take from him, that no jailer could ever take from him, even though he was imprisoned physically, was they could not take his mind. They could not steal his thoughts. And that's the one freedom that every man, woman, and child on this planet, as far as I'm concerned, has. That's what we all have. So if our thoughts take us into negative places, if our thoughts are about resentments or angers or fears or doubts or worries, it doesn't matter how much money you have or what advantages you have or what color your skin is or any other thing. you will end up miserable. You will be miserable because of that. And we know plenty of people who have seemingly everything who are, in fact, in pain and are suffering and are miserable. And we know plenty of people, too, that have far less that seemingly are leading good lives, healthy lives, happy, dare I say it, happy lives. So to me, this is a wisdom that comes of age. Now, I didn't know that. I didn't have that concept. That's not what I was striving for at 35. All I was striving for was kill it, crush it. That's it. Make as much as I can, you know, and alleviate the doubt, the fear, the worry that is at least financially related, which is a big, big deal to be really honest. So, you know, again, you asked a question. I answered it in part, and the other part is, I'd say, from my parents' side of things, I've learned to trust my instincts. I think if with 4 kids, the one thing we've always wanted for our kids, because they don't come with any manual, you know, you're a parent, you know this, right? There's no instruction manual. What we've wanted is for our kids to trust themselves, to be independent thinking, not to be, you know, look, we all have we as a species have to be connected to other people. But it bothers me that we see that we're such herd creatures. It really bothers me, honestly, that so many people go along with things because they're a part of a herd. And I get it. You feel more secure and safe inside of the herd. I've never been part of the herd or felt like I needed to be, in part because of being bullied, because I didn't feel, I'm being really direct and truthful with you now, I didn't feel like I could trust the herd. And that's been a great gift to me, because to be able to see objectively outside of that feels good. And yet at times it feels like I want to lean more into that as part of my growth, is to be able to be a part of the herd and not fear that somehow or another I've lost some of my autonomy in that process, you know, because that's been my safety card, right? But my instincts, trusting myself, wanting our kids to trust themselves. And I think that's been really important, because a lot of people that I meet that are even attorneys, frankly, who've had plenty of, you know, they ask me, how on earth did you give up the money? How did you walk away from the golden ticket, you know? But again, only reason I could do that was not because I had a crystal ball that it would all work out great. It's because I just trusted my instincts. And so people listening to this, that maybe there's something wrong, you just know it's not right, something. I'm not telling you to jump ship, not go serve your spouse with divorce papers or quit your job or your business. That's the extreme version. But start getting curious about the kind of things that you truly do want, and know that with the ability to think, you have that freedom. You could think your way into anything, good, bad, or otherwise.
That's powerful, Adam. I could talk to you for hours. I'm excited to finish this book. I'm definitely going to get a hold of Pivot, and I hope that we can stay in touch. I really do. Really, I connect so much to what you said. I felt like I was isolated because I didn't fit into the herd. I didn't fit into all of the things. But the more I learn about myself and the more I grow as a person, I don't need that. I don't have to be like everybody else. I'm actually pretty damn cool just the way that I am. Like the uniqueness and the differences are what makes everybody awesome. Thank God we're not all the same. Thank God we don't all have to be the same. That's awesome. Well, I'm about out of time. Adam, thank you once again. You are the man. I really appreciate the fact that you are leaning into every bit of who God created you to be, and you are doing amazing work. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Geoff. I appreciate you as well.
Yeah, boy.